right, we're back. Thank you very much, guys. Takes us to motion number 11 in our discussion agenda, and that reads the motion that the Common Council approves an ordinance modifying Chapter 160 of the City of Oneonta Municipal Code entitled Historic Preservation. This ordinance was laid electronically on January 17th, 2025, and on the council desks on January 21st, 2025. Do I have a motion to approve? I have Don. Shannon? Okay. And discussion of this. Have we?
I have a question.
Yes.
We discussed this, I think, in the finance meeting, and then we brought it to council, and then it went to the legislative committee. Is that correct? I don't think so. We didn't? I thought that was on the agenda for last. Len had said.
No, we discussed administrative fees last time, but I don't think that
Not
we
the
discussed
historic
this.
preservation.
Well, that being the case, that being the case, do we have discussion? Is everybody familiar with the ordinance?
Yeah.
Okay. If we don't have discussion, we'll wait a couple of seconds and we'll take a vote. Yes.
I was at the.
I just recalled what I'm actually referring to. It was the fee.
Yeah.
Before that was.
The fees. Yeah.
Okay.
I cleared it up for myself.
Right. All right. Well, let's take a vote.
Councilmember Moser Campoli?
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo?
Aye.
Councilmember McHugh?
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu?
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington?
No.
Councilmember Forrester Rothbard?
No.
And then Councilmember Matheson.
Could we have somebody flag Don, please?
Should we say one more reading?
Mayor?
Do we have 4 yeses, 2 noes?
It's better than awkward silence, right? Only marginally. You'll sing, right?
I'm sorry. I had it.
I understand. Are you prepared to vote on this?
Yes.
Okay. And when your vote is?
Yes.
Okay. So it passes with 5. Okay. All right. Motion number 12, that the Common Council authorizes the city administrator to terminate its existing contract with Coughlin Gerhardt LLP, Binghamton, New York, for professional legal services, parentheses, labor relations, close parentheses, effective February 17, 2025. The Common Council further authorizes the city administrator to execute an agreement with Bond, Schoeneck and King, PLLC, Syracuse, New York, for professional legal services, parentheses, labor relations, close parentheses, for a term beginning, I'm afraid that was cut off. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't cut off. There's quite a bit of paragraph. February 7 through December 31, 2025, subject to review by the city attorney. Agreed upon billing rates for 2025 shall include a retainer of $1,700 per month for basic legal fees. In addition, the hourly rates for litigation, court appearances, and other proceedings which do not occur on a regular basis but for which the city expressly authorizes and requests assistance shall be $290 for partners, senior counsel, $255 for senior associates, $235 for junior associates, and $210 for paralegal. Sorry about the stutter in the middle of that. Do we have a motion to approve? Cecilia, followed by Elaine. And discussion on this? Have we discussion on this, Cecilia?
Yeah, I just pulled this from our finance committee discussion just to give the council a chance, because we had a discussion about 6 weeks to 2 months ago regarding legal fees, and this is just an announcement of the fact that the attorney that the city's been using is changing law firms.
Right.
Yeah. So just to keep everybody.
And everybody's clear on that. Knowing that, is there any further discussion? If there isn't, we'll call a vote.
Councilmember Mosher Campoli.
Aye.
Councilmember Walsh Russo.
Aye.
Councilmember McHugh.
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Forrester Rothbard.
Yes.
Councilmember Matheson.
Yes.
Okay. Now, motion number 13, this, if you take a moment to quickly just make yourself familiar with this motion. If there's a desire among council members to move this to executive session, what I would like to do is actually move that to the end of our agenda so that we don't wind up losing the flow that we have here and are able to get to a couple of other things. So, do we have a sense that is there? Okay, so we'll just move it to the tail end of things. All right, so with that, we'll move to our take-home vehicle use policy, and this is just an item for discussion. Now, this has found its way to the legislative committee. Has this? Who's had this?
Finance.
Finance has had this. Okay, so let's have a bit of discussion around this. Sissa, you want to kind of lead off?
Sure.
Am I?
So we had a discussion that looked at the current agreement, and we discussed the incorporation of of including the transportation director in terms of the list. We had the current list of those department heads that take home vehicles that include the fire chief, police chief, and the transportation director, but that last department head is not included in the agreement currently, so we would want that, the suggestion was to have that updated.
Okay. And folks, that sounds like a plan, or?
Ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Could you just tell us a little bit more about the reasoning that was given for including this title and, not others, I guess?
Oh, Greg, I don't know if
Yeah,
you wanted
I
to.
can
Yeah,
jump in there.
that'd be great.
So this policy, I look back in our minutes, was originally approved, I think, I sent an email about it, I think it was 2008, if I recall, by the council. Hadn't been looked at or updated since then, I'm aware of. We don't have a city engineer anymore. In that case, when we did have a city engineer, when it was me, I wasn't taking a vehicle home. That's not something that we need to do anymore. General supervisor no longer takes a vehicle home. A fleet operations manager doesn't take a vehicle home. The only two that are currently, according to this policy, allowed to take a vehicle home, fire chief and police chief, they do. But our transportation director also does, and I think that's been a fairly long-standing practice. I'm not sure why it's not included on this. I think in reality, and Virginia might be able to jump in here too, the fleet operations manager, the person in that title formerly, was also the transportation director. I think that person sometimes took a vehicle home. The justification for that title, taking a vehicle home, the transportation director, is the one in that vehicle. He's got the accident reconstruction equipment and the appropriate training to go with that, to go to a site of a bus accident, if there is one, which could be from Cooperstown to Sydney or anywhere in between, different times of day depending on when those bus routes are operating. And he's obviously not always at work, and there are, right now, there's really no one else that can respond to those. Due to FTA regulations, we have to respond within a certain time frame, so within 2 hours if there's a need, which is determined through the evaluation process by the trained person to evaluate the accident. If there's a need to send the driver for drug and alcohol testing based on certain, there's a form we have to fill out that's from the FTA. If that is triggered, then that has to be done within 2 hours. So there's a time frame, and there's a need where we might have to respond to somewhere that's not, necessarily somewhere you can reach within 2 hours and conduct the accident reconstruction and make those determinations in that time frame. So for that reason, that's why that individual's been taking a vehicle home. Obviously the fire chief and the police chief, that justification is that they may need to respond to an emergency, and being able to do so, as Brian has explained in recent in email correspondence, it really comes in handy. Granted, we have first responders at the fire station, the police station in that case, to respond directly, but having the chief able to respond and provide that oversight and supervision a little bit more quickly than if they had to go to the station first has been deemed to benefit in the past, and I think it still holds true. So those are the three that I think right now, based on our current practices, make sense to include in the policy. This was brought up just in our discussions with the fire chief a couple of weeks ago, so it was mentioned that why don't we review the policy? So that's why we're bringing it through now. And we don't have a specific recommendation, like a new policy drafted. It's very short. We could look at if there's anything else that ought to be included in there, but we want to have some discussion with the council first, then we could theoretically bring this back through the Finance and Human Resources Committee with an update.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful.
Sure.
Anybody else have any thoughts on the matter? Yes, Michael?
Greg, do you have any information on what the cost to the city ends up being?
I have not done a cost analysis. That's something we could do as part of our next discussion at the Finance Committee.
If other people think it's necessary, I don't know.
Kind of leads into the question I was gonna ask was, when you start looking at this, if we're starting to look at doing this, and I understand that, you know, the director for our boss, but when you're starting to look at this, and we look at the charter, and we gave a waiver, and that's what started all this. You're putting more wear and tear on a vehicle. We're already sitting there knowing the price on vehicles, gas, insurance. You're gonna have more liability in the way of, because you're running a longer distance. And the minute you put red lights and sirens on, that seems to be when everything happens. Well, I'm not against take-home cars. I think you should have it within your primary response district. If you're gonna live outside of that primary response district, then I think, you know, you should have to weigh the thing that you may not have a take-home car. It's not anything personal, it's just the way I look at it. I think it's also an incentive to try to get people to stay within the city boundaries, even when they apply for a job. That's just my 2 takes on it. Like I said, I'm more worried about, you know, you're gonna have increased gas, increased wear and tear that you normally wouldn't have. And I understand response time, but if you look at the averages of the response time you really save, it's not, you know, I mean, he's going to the scene versus going to the firehouse, I get that, or the police department, you know, I get that. But, you know, these are just some concerns. I'm not saying I'm against it, I'm not saying I'm going to, you know, these are just concerns that I have that I think we need to look at and address as we do a policy. And the other one is, you know, how do we make sure that they're not using it for personal services, like taking it for, you know, stopping at the grocery store on the way home to grab a thing of milk because, you know, it's on your way home, you know. And I know we kind of said to that before with taxes and stuff, there's a concern there. So, I mean, I just think we have to look at it as a whole and figure out how we're going to kind of come up with this stuff. Like, you know, maybe we have to put, you know, technology on the vehicle so it's, you know, just stuff to think about.
Anybody have any thoughts to piggyback on that, or? Yes, Mike.
I also wondered if we have the operational capacity that it wouldn't necessarily have to be the fire chief or police chief or fleet operations manager, if that's even a practical way to think about it, it'd be like the assistant chief. Like, for example, like, I'm thinking both in terms of vehicle use, but I'm also thinking in terms of the demands on the position to have a, you know, basically the fire chief, police chief are then, you know, on call 24/7. And then it might be valuable to have the assistant chief also have that capacity so that responsibility can be shared. I don't know if that's what the fire department or police department and transit would want or not, but I just want to raise that question.
Any thoughts? Okay. All right, well, I feel like we've, yes, go ahead.
It sounds like from the conversation that we should revisit in finance committee, have further discussion about policy perhaps.
It sounds right, yes, it does.
So as some kind of resolution to this.
Right, and ultimately that we get to a place where we are making some sort of a decision as opposed to just having a discussion. Sounds right. Okay, and Paul, how close are you to being able to film? Minutes?
Probably about 2 minutes.
Okay.
So can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes, of course.
On that, maybe this is more for the chief, if I can ask it directly to him. How does it work with turnout gear now, with all the restrictions? Do you guys fall underneath that same thing with having your turnout gear in that vehicle?
It's just how you store it. You put it in a Rubbermaid container and it seals the carcinogens in there. But my turnout gear is very minimally exposed to carcinogens because I'm not entering the building outside of the man's presence.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so Paul Carnier, is here. Again, more volunteerism from Otsego Media, which we really appreciate. We are stringing together these 30-minute discussions that we're having in preparation for a vote in the first meeting in May on 27 Market Street, but building something like a foundation not only for our own decision-making, but also for the community to understand what it is that we're talking about in total. And I'm just going to leave this on the table here, Paul. I think it's probably based on what we heard last time. So Otsego Media is stringing together these 30-minute sessions that we're having, these little modules, so that they can be viewed by the public. We'll get the, I don't know if it's linked yet to the city page, but it will be, and we'll make sure that it's promoted. So the people have an opportunity to kind of hear the council's conversation and that consensus that hopefully is built among council members as to the overall direction. I don't want to land on 27 Market Street, not for a while. We talked about last council meeting density. We know that density is something that both the comprehensive plan and certainly the strategic plan lands on in multiple different ways in the affirmative. Yes, in fact, this council, I think, all but agreed, as Don said, we need to be more dense, and we do. So, and I showed the difference. Luckily, we have a friend over at the History Center who has just a tremendous wealth of old imagery and showed us what Oneonta looked like before we started tearing down buildings, and of course we know what Oneonta looks like now. We looked at density as being something that is we said that the council would pursue density as opposed to just kind of tolerate density, and I think that that's an important distinction to make. So given that we are committed as a council to the pursuit of density, and I don't have a PowerPoint for you, it's been a busy week, but what I want to do is kind of paint a picture, and I want you guys to paint a picture. Presuming that the best, most logical spot for the density is in the Market Street and adjacent areas, as you'll recall the map and where the lack of buildings are. What do we envision this housing as being? And then what I want you to do in that imagining, it's important to understand that the city's adopted laws and regulations call for a mix of residential and commercial uses, and that previous councils have endorsed a development pattern on Market Street that's dense and mixed use. So I would like you guys to just kind of talk about waving a magic wand, not worrying about parking, not worrying about any of these other things. What does Market Street look like to you in 20 years? What would you like to think that Market Street might look like? So what would you like it to look like, Elaine?
I see it heading in a direction that is very vibrant, including arts and other cultural things for people to do, walkability, accessibility, and really being a hub, like having the transportation center there, creating a place that, you know, people can gather and come and go and enjoy the space there. Yeah, live, work, and play.
And so you've got a street level that looks like something, and then you've got housing above that. I would imagine if a developer is going to build, our expectation based on what we've already agreed, the pursuit of density, we're not just talking about, you know, somebody puts in a single level, but we're talking about housing. So who's living there? Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Just look at the subject slightly differently.
Sure.
Market Street isn't the only area where we could develop housing, and it might be the best or the most readily available or not. I think what the city needs is housing, new housing on all levels, and I would encourage the development of condos, multifamily housing that has income. Let me rephrase that. All income levels need more multifamily housing. So not necessarily have different income levels in the same building. That doesn't usually work. And I think we also need single-family homes and encourage them to have accessory units throughout the city. If I were to imagine how we can increase housing, I would think along the Chestnut Street corridor, have condominiums built. And I looked into this a while ago, and I believe it's zoned where that could happen. So just to look at Market Street, I think is, you know, limiting the possibilities. Because let's face it, we need housing for people of all income levels. There's not a lot of housing that would attract young families. There's not a lot of housing that would attract older folks. We just don't have it, and that's the kind of housing that I think we should look at it in a broader sense.
So, presuming that this isn't actually a binary choice, that we
I can do
need,
that.
presuming that this isn't a binary choice, that we need to choose between one area for housing or another area for housing, and that your points are well taken. Generally, the density that we talked about, by definition, is in the city proper, in the downtown area proper. So this is kind of the discussion I'm having here, but
We can
but I'd like
increase
to-
density in all parts of the city, though.
Well-
It doesn't-
Well, I mean, I think if you live in the city, if you experience living in the city, I know you have, that there's a difference, obviously, in the density that a city block provides versus the outskirts of the city, where there may be a lot of houses, one next to the other, and multiple people living in those houses. It's a different aesthetic. It's a different type of building. It's a different use of space. But you also made a point that mixed incomes living in the same building don't work. I think that's what you said.
Yes.
And I wonder if there's anybody that would refute that or have a different opinion.
Wait, I think he said that people of the same income levels living in the same building doesn't generally work, right?
It's people are more likely to be, in buildings that, so you wouldn't have in one building, if it's a 5-unit or a 10-unit apartment building, ordinarily it wouldn't have like low income, middle income, and high income in the same building.
So you were suggesting that's what we should do?
Excuse me?
Is that what you're?
Just the reverse of that.
No, I'm saying it wouldn't, from a market point of view, it probably wouldn't happen.
So, Steve, do you mind if I just go to you for a second, talking about the mixes of incomes in different...
So that type of project is a popular way to fund affordable housing. Many cities have inclusionary zoning requirements which require upper middle income housing units to include affordable housing units as a way to get height bonuses, exclusions from certain parts of the zoning code. I mean, so that's actually a common mechanism that's used in many cities to build affordable housing units.
And isn't the Ford on Main, isn't that an example of a few different entry points in terms of income?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mixed income building. But there are buildings where the affordable housing portion of it is part of like a zoning incentive, where if you
build a certain number of affordable units, you can build an additional story in the building, you can add additional square footage to the block, you can, so it's usually used as like a mechanism to gain advantage from the developer. It can also be used as a way to like secure, grant funding. Some communities have their own investment models where the municipality actually funds or provides incentive if you build affordable housing units. But yeah, those are all mechanisms used.
Right, so if I heard what you said, Don, you were saying, was your contention that,
Well,
Yeah, so tell me again
in
what you
terms
said.
of affordable housing and all that, I don't, there's different numbers that go. So what I'm saying is, it's unlikely that a developer would build a building that had very low-income people and very high-income people in the same building. I think at one of the council members, one of the council meetings, I told the story about, when I was in the city, I was doing a story about a high-rise building, and the developer had taken subsidies and had to have low-income people in the building, so he created a pour door. The bottom so many floors had to enter on the side because they were subsidized houses, subsidized apartments, and then the upper floors, they came in on the avenue, and there was a hue and cry about that, and in the end, they weren't allowed to do that for good reason. But the argument was that the developer would not be able to rent the upper floors, people who were paying high rents, if they had to share the lobby with people who were subsidized. And again, it didn't happen that way. They didn't have the pour door, and as they should not have. But I'm just saying, if these are commercially operated buildings with the landlord hoping to make a profit, they're unlikely to have mixed income in the same building.
Right, that's the intention of the incentive. I mean, that's why those incentives exist.
Right.
And that developer obviously took those incentives.
Yeah, they took it from an incentive.
Yeah, so I mean, that is the difference between what like a free market capitalist version of development might look like versus what is commonly used as far as like grant funding, public funds to build homes.
What I was talking about when I was saying that it'd be nice if there were condos along Chestnut Street, just as an example,
Yeah, that's
those
great.
would all be privately funded.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And we've had someone build a 10-unit apartment on Chestnut Street.
but it's not an either-or scenario. I want to go to Judy and then to Elaine, please.
I was just gonna say that, the income limits that are in Los Angeles, private East House building, are actually low and moderate income. That they go up to 99% of, the AMI, so the census data basically. That's moderate income, that's actually lower moderate income. When you're going for funding, with the state at least, they're looking for a mixed building, and they don't want just low income or, it's very hard to get funding for high income, housing without having some low income housing, or low and moderate income housing. They want the mix, they want to see that in downtown, they want to see all income levels being able to.
Don, I'm going to want to go to
Just
Elaine.
one quick question though, is low and middle income and all that, I don't know what those numbers are, is it subsidized or not subsidized income? So if you're living in Springbrook,
It's your income, and if you're low income, the rents may be subsidized, but you have to put in a share of your income, and it doesn't matter where your income comes from, if you have income.
my question is, in the example of Springbrook, are all of those, the people who live there, are they all subsidized, or is some of them paying all of the rent? So it's both.
We actually have an employee here that lives there.
I don't get that.
We have a city employee that lives there.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to go to Elaine, please.
Yeah, so I feel like my question has mostly been answered, because, I'm hearing Councilmember Matheson's experience from the past where, we were bordering on segregation, with housing, which is definitely not a direct funding, but it sounds like there are some successful examples, of housing projects and incentives, and that's really the question I wanted to ask, but thank you, Judy, for, addressing that. So it sounds like Gates and Springbrook are local, examples of that, right?
So, Michael?
Okay.
I want to go back to your original question.
Yes.
Like, what could we strive for in 20 years?
Yeah.
And I think, yes, higher density in the downtown area, but I would go by general planning studies that seem to indicate that for walkable cities, most people are willing to walk, most able-bodied people are willing to walk a quarter mile or maybe up to half a mile. So if we think in those terms, and we think within a quarter mile, say, of Main Street, that essentially goes from, from River Street to like the Red Door Church is within a quarter mile of the commercial part of Main Street and up as far as Walnut. So I kind of think that that's kind of like, or even Center Street, that's kind of the area that we're talking about. And how we get higher density, I mean, one way is to amend our ordinance to allow, like you said, secondary accessory dwelling units.
We've already done that.
But
We have
in,
that.
but that's only in, is that in all districts?
Yep, that's
Yeah.
Okay. Want to encourage that, and also, think of different scales. You have like the 6 dwelling unit condo, and you have the apartment building that has 30 units, and think about trying to cluster that higher density into nodes. And it doesn't just have to be Main Street. I mean, I think your point about Chestnut is well taken, that there could be a denser spot on Chestnut Street where you try to make that sort of a walkable neighborhood. I think we should encourage the town to think about the same kind of thing, say, at Lettuce Highway and Southside, or somewhere like that, where they could have, it's all commercial now, but there's no reason that in the future couldn't be a residential hub. The second thing I wanted to say is just that whether or not, I don't know if it requires inclusionary zoning to get developers to have mixed development, but if we find that it does, then I think we should move in that direction.
Well, I'm just curious what do you mean by mixed use?
Mixed
Mixed-use development?
not mixed use.
Okay.
Although mixed use development also, but what I meant was mixed levels of affordability.
I see. In terms of income.
Yeah, in terms of income, that if we find that that's not happening, then we should think about an inclusionary zoning ordinance. I've seen that be very successful. Like Steve said, you give the developers some benefit, which in return for having a certain number of affordable units.
So in the interest of keeping this to half an hour,
Yeah.
we'll keep it short.
I want to make it clear, I am opposed in every way, shape, and form to segregation. What I don't like is when, one neighborhood becomes, low income, and in another neighborhood becomes middle income, and another one becomes high income. I don't want to see that kind of development at all. I'm encouraging integration on all levels, and I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Tom. So one of the things that we talked about, quickly, sure.
I was just gonna say, going on, piggybacking on the idea of needing all different kinds of housing and development, when we're talking about it, what I'm hearing, from many of our local organizations especially, is that yes, we do need especially affordable housing, we need a supportive housing, we need housing for seniors. So, I agree that there's, housing development is needed in many different.
Accessible housing.
Accessibility,
Not-
absolutely.
A lot of people are lacking in accessibility.
So going back to our conversation of a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that I did, I had a PowerPoint and I showed the images from 50-something years ago of the Broad Street area that had been torn down and some other areas that had been torn down. And the thing that we all saw was that those buildings, while they weren't in the best of shape, one of the rationale for tearing them down, they were all occupied. Generally speaking, we saw curtains in the windows, and that was a moment in Oneonta's timeline where we were doing okay. We had staff that were working in shops, staff that were working in restaurants. They lived right there. They weren't rich by definition. Look at where they were living, but they were also people on the street. And one of the things about people on the street is that it's a fact that if you have a vibrant street with a lot of people on it, you have less of the vagrancy and other issues that have become one of the concerns for the city, obviously. So when we're looking at the, against that question of density, most specifically, and not to disagree at all with your points, both Mike and Don, about the viability of the rest of the city within a quarter-mile walking, yes, absolutely. But the very short distance of being downtown and being somebody who's a 12-month-a-year customer for those various businesses, restaurants, et cetera, has had value in the past, seems like it should have value in the future. So what I want to ask you guys to do, again, magic wand stuff, not worrying about parking, not worrying about some of these other things we will address, and maybe those will resolve in that conversation. But what I want you to do is imagine that you're walking down Market Street sometime in the not too distant future, wide sidewalks, right? Elegant lampposts, nice job with the lampposts. They look really good. You got tree line blocks, what is the makeup of the street? What's the neighborhood look like? Because that's what we potentially have the ability to be thinking about creating a neighborhood. Assume that we're going to have a tourist and visitor-friendly attraction in the former train station. I think that's a pretty good bet. And a busy transit hub, and a new bank building, and the Foothills Performing Arts Center all on Market Street. And a block away, we got Water Street, and we got Clinton Plaza. So, what does the area look like? We got these big wide sidewalks. Why do people want to be on them? What would make Market Street area more vibrant? What kind of housing would support Market Street and downtown businesses? And what does that support look like? So, Cecilia.
Well, it seems like to draw on what Elaine said earlier in terms of space and walkability and housing. I don't think we talked last time about the idea of third spaces. It's just something that Oneonta, I think, needs much more of. And we have the capacity already. We don't need to necessarily increase density for third spaces. And third spaces are those locations where people can go. It's not their home. It's not a friend's house. It's a public or quasi-public space, cafe, a bookstore, and where people can just hang out. And I think we need a lot more of those. And I think that should be in our future.
Right. That's one of the ways. I was just talking to some staff at SUNY a little bit earlier who are new to the city. One of the ways that we retain them, is by providing an interesting, connective experience that's not in competition to Main Street, which is really an important thing, because as we are creating a neighborhood, we don't want to diminish the viability of a neighborhood that we already have, the commercial neighborhood that we already have. So, and then, there's also the real likely possibility of connecting to Niwa Park off of Market Street, which really generates a tremendous amount of, a new connection that is transformative. So again, if you're just kind of looking at the street, if you're 20 years down the road now, what would you like to think that Market Street looks like? We presume that there'll be housing above, but what are we looking at? Like you said, the third spaces. How does that look as we're walking down Market Street?
I think it looks, as Elaine said, I think there's a vibrancy then. It's a street or space that is well used in terms of pedestrian space. And I think, in my notes I wrote that there should be housing near a transit hub. I think that's really necessary in the coming decades, that people have options other than just cars,
right.
Cars and other forms of transit that are taken seriously and that give people a real opportunity to move about.
And then when we're talking about the potential of where we might have development, we have the lot next door to the Foothills, as obviously it's a blank canvas. and the owner wants to do things that are connective to the arts, and, you know, that level of you know, engagement, interaction that, you know, kind of speaks to that vision of Market Street. Also, we'll have a parking lot behind the transit hub, but we also have what is essentially a foundation for development, and that might include yet another level of parking and housing. I mean, all of that stuff is, if you just kind of, you know, just imagine, you know, what do you see? Scott, any thoughts? What are you seeing?
20 years from now.
Yeah, 20 years from now, for our kids, grandkids, in my case.
I'm just trying to sit back and absorb everything that
Yeah.
people are saying. I mean, I just don't really know if I have a thought right now.
All right, I'm watching the clock as well. So I guess the question that, what happened, Mike?
You can finish your thought, but then I.
No, go ahead.
So as far as Market Street in particular, what I could imagine is basically a pedestrian greenway that connected from Muller Plaza to Nevo Park, perpendicular to Market Street with development, you know, sidewalk side development, like no front, not a setback from the street particularly, but, you know, sort of a Main Street kind of feeling where there's a wide sidewalk and
It's Broad Street.
storefronts.
You're talking about Broad
Right.
Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so that South Main, Market Street, Chestnut Street extension perhaps, you know, that all those would have buildings with either fully residential or commercial on the first floor and residential upstairs. And I agree, some kind of third places, whether it's coffee shops, whether it's the, you know, the sort of thing that we started to see like on Beach Street, you know, but so that I think the connectivity is important. So that if there are places that people want to be, like the ballpark and Muller Plaza and the library, that you can walk between those places.
Yeah.
So that the way people's mode of doing things would be not to like park on Main Street and run into a store and then drive to Nevo Park and then drive back to the library, but like just park somewhere for the afternoon and go around between different places, and where the residents who live there could easily get out. And of course, when we get to parking, that's sort of the thorn in any denser development that we'll have to figure out how to tackle, but that's my vision.
But you can kind of imagine, at least I've been, you've got 216 parking spots over by Demoski Field and the large pavilion, 216 spots, and you've got a pedestrian and bicyclist path over a bridge and over the Mill Race and to Market Street, and you're connected that way. So you've got the park and you've got all of that. You've got parking, and you're right there on Market Street. And now you can take an elevator or you can walk. The ideal of, you know, maybe reimagine of Broad Street and that kind of connectivity. I mean, we're not saying anything can't be done. We're waving a magic wand, saying what would we like, you know? And that conjures up with the lampposts and the ambiance and the, you know, what a great place. Who wouldn't want to be there? You know, wouldn't want to kind of hang out in that city, right?
It is 1,100 feet if you can make a straight line connection from Demoski Field to Muller Plaza. So that's 0.2 of a mile.
I think it got brought up at some point that our require taking over someone's property, personal property, privately owned property.
I mean, I'm not saying, I'm just saying that there's possibilities.
Yeah, the possibility is there. The possibility is absolutely there. I guess, and not this, again, it's magic wand stuff, right? And then those devils and details, you know, will present themselves as you get to them. Last question I want to put out, and we're going to wrap this up in about 7 minutes. In your mind's eye, you know, council discussion, how's that development happen? You know, and what do you think are the challenges for developers, and what are the various ways that we may be able to assist them, and Steve, how is our zoning designed to allow that best outcome? Maybe, Stephen, could I have you kind of jump on this to begin with?
Has anyone actually read the zoning code or comprehensive plan?
Yes.
So our MU1 code is extremely descriptive of what those spaces look like. It's very specific in its design requirements. It also is kind of a best practices document for urban development. So that type of coding is exactly what many cities are using. It's mirrors practices found in like the Buffalo Uniform Green Code, which is an award-winning code. So basically what we did was we took our comprehensive planning document from 2019, which said you should develop a form-based code. We then took all the ideas out of the comprehensive planning document and then worked that into the MU1 code. So there's all kinds of language in there, but there's also just a ton of pictures in there as well. There's diagrams that show all the setback stuff, kind of like Mike said, you want like no setback, well, it's all in there. It's literally written out, there's little pictures and diagrams, and it kind of makes that image come to fruition. So the zoning code specifically drawn up to design that space. And, you know, we also, if you look at like the use tables in that zoning code, they've been reduced to like, instead of being like, we allow laundromats, but we don't allow dry cleaners, we don't allow this, but we do allow ice cream shops, but not frozen yogurt stands. The code has basically been reduced to like retail. It mirrors the New York State Building Code. So the building code classifies things into very broad categories like residential, retail, business, and those broad categories are what are allowed in our downtown right now. So if you have an idea, basically the city of Oneonta is like, we probably are gonna let you do it. With the exception of like adult uses, those are still regulated in our downtown code, but for the most part, like, if you wanna open a business, the city of Oneonta is probably not gonna tell you you can't. If you wanna build a building, if you're building it to the line, if you're using quality construction materials, you plant 3 trees, we'll probably let you do it. The only kind of sticking part to that is we do require multi-story buildings in our downtown. Ideally, we don't want inefficient uses of land like 1-story structures. We're moving away from like Clinton Plaza type buildings, just because they are inefficient, and over time, those buildings, they have a useful life that's short. Most of them aren't made to have additional stories added to them. Most of them aren't made to support future growth. They were kind of built as like one-stop shops, and that's why these suburban strip malls, like in the town, are great examples of just inefficiency. So if you want to see a great example of that, go out and look at the old Tractor Supply building. There's a vacant one, and then right across the street, there's another one that they just built because whatever. You can see that if you go out to the mall in Albany. There's a Barnes and Nobles, vacant Barnes and Nobles, and across the street, there's new Barnes and Nobles inside the mall. So we're trying to move away from those types of structures because they don't really have a life to them. So if you want to build a multi-story building in Oneonta and you need an instruction book, we have a zoning code that is made to tell you exactly what we want you to build.
And you can really dream on that. When so Carrie's going to send the link to all council members so that you can kind of look at one of the things that Steve brings to the game here are wonderful and informative graphics. And as I said, you can really dream on this stuff, and you can really imagine. You know, we have a blank slate, a blank canvas to work with. If not that we can snap our fingers and make it happen, but in this moment we can kind of. I want us to be in this moment just dreaming. What can we do? And we'll just continue the conversation. I'm not going to continue this on the 18th. This is going to be a long meeting, and we're already getting together at 5 p.m. But we'll come back to this. We're staying on schedule, and we'll come back to this that first meeting in March. But I appreciate this is a kind of an interesting. Hopefully, you find it interesting. Yes, go ahead, Katie.
Oh, you can finish.
Yeah, exercise. Go ahead, Katie.
Oh, that was it?
Yes.
Well, you said that we're not gonna talk about it on the 18th, but the next topic that you sent out to us is like Center City Vision or something.
Yeah, and I've kinda
like that, which is
comboed this.
Obviously of particular interest to me.
Okay.
Well, I just would like to know, like, what you hope to accomplish from that conversation. I'd like to have discussions with my neighbors about it,
Mhm.
to come to the meeting
That,
prepared.
so to answer your question, I've comboed that. So the vision for the city has been part of what our conversation has been here today. So I've taken these two things so that we have the time on the 18th, and we can get out of there in a reasonable amount of time.
So the Center City discussion's not happening.
We can always have that discussion, but that discussion was informed to this discussion. So we talked about housing and the vision for the Market Street area, just generally speaking.
Okay, I wouldn't describe that as, I mean,
So
it's
even-
downtown, but like Center City's like
Not
a
Center City.
residential
Mhm.
neighborhood, so I.
Yeah, so we, absolutely, we can continue to expand on that conversation.
Okay.
And if we
I-
fly through the meeting on the 18th, then we can, land on that, with more detail then.
I mean, my request would just be that you involve the residents of Center City in that discussion and,
Mhm.
that it's not just us streaming on their behalf.
Right, well, you are the representatives of your constituents,
But,
and,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but like, we haven't been involved in any of the planning and preparation for any of these discussions. We basically come and with open minds to
Mhm.
hear what you have to say for 30 minutes precisely. But there's no real like preparation or planning documents or anything like that, so it's just, I think, helpful to have an idea so that we can communicate and be effective representatives with our neighbors. If we know what the intended outcome from your perspective is, or what you want to accomplish or whatever, so that we can talk to our constituents and get their input and come to the meeting and represent them and
sure.
advocate
So
for them.
I appreciate
So-
that. So my intended outcomes
Mhm.
are that we have a general discussion in which we are all essentially on the same page in terms of what the overarching vision is for the Market Street area. What might it look like? What do we think we want in terms of housing, density, et cetera? And we've addressed those things. And that those various components wind up informing a conversation that becomes more specific as we start to get to the proposals that have been, that we have for the sale and building of the development, at 27 Market Street. So this is more, there is nothing more, there's nothing behind the curtain here.
No, that's fine.
This is literally about having a general conversation so that we all kind of get the idea of where we might be going.
You just had written Center City Vision or something to that effect as like a list of topics, so I wasn't sure if there was something more targeted to my neighborhood and in that
Yeah,
case,
and I
would
understand,
want-
Center City being Center City.
That's what I thought as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
So,
even this, because I was quick trying to get the outline of this together, so even this was called housing, and in my notes, I have this envisioning a neighborhood. And housing informs that. So I would not take, and I'm sorry if it was misleading and cause of concern. When I say Center City, I'm certainly not talking about like Spruce Street.
okay, I just
Okay.
wanted to be prepared if it was.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. All right, so again, now we've gone over that half hour, but I'm trying to keep these modules to that. And so we'll close this down. I appreciate your involvement and your creative thinking. And we'll move on to additional business or items for council consideration. And Mike, I bet you got something.
Sure. So as several of you have heard me say, I'm concerned about trying to improve our transparency and accessibility of our meetings, and had conversations with Carrie and Greg about how we can move forward on that. Part of it is the audio-visual, like to improve the streaming, which Carrie, maybe you can talk about it, but will require some kind of investment because we've been kind of band-aiding it together. Some of it might require changing some of our practices, like if we can get someone, figure out the microphones so we can have people who are addressing us speak with microphones so that the people on live stream can hear it, or Carrie explained to me that there are some additional microphones connected to that camera that we may be able to activate. Because I don't know if any of you guys have watched the council meetings. It's not too hard to understand people up here who are speaking, but it's really difficult to understand anyone who's not there. So in the long term, I hope we'll move towards that. In the short term, I think maybe if we can just figure out a way to extend this microphone cord somehow so that we can actually have people who address us be able to be heard. The second part of that is doing transcriptions of our meetings, which, again, it depends how much we want to spend on it. The sort of cheaper cost would use something like, Otter through Zoom or Teams, things like that provide a sort of generic transcript that is not going to be completely accurate, but can be used as reference and then can direct people back to the video to be able to see it. Like more complex solutions would perhaps require staff time to correct them, or to be able to, or more money on the system to be able to identify the speaker. I'm not sure that's necessary if I'm thinking of it like, Katie, like you said last week, of being able to see where in the video a certain topic is discussed, and if that could go hand in hand with the transcript, that would be great. So anyway, I'm kind of working on that. I don't know if Carrie and Greg, if you guys want to talk about it. The other component of it is somehow thinking about redesigning this space so it doesn't feel like performance art of the council versus the audience, and maybe this space could be more flexible. I mean, that's a longer term thing, but Carrie, Greg, did you want to add anything?
Defer to.
I think you summarized it pretty well. I mean, we've talked for years now about, I really don't think this space is very well designed, the physical layout of it for productive meetings. And certainly it's designed for one type of meeting, like a council meeting, and maybe a council meeting doesn't need to be laid out this way either. I think it's maybe something that we should look into, maybe get some expert input and see what other options there might be if we were to redesign everything and not have built-in furniture. And I've read some things about that. I'm certainly no expert in it, but I think it might be something we do some research and look into.
Scott?
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike, but I think what we gotta look at comprehensively on this whole thing is bigger picture. Is this room just is not big enough, especially when you get hot topics going on. We're going down to the foothills, or we're going somewhere else. I think we really have to take a look at this building comprehensively and say, what are we going to do? Because I think you might have to blow this wall out to accommodate some of what you want, and rechange this and get rid of those hard seats there that all these people are sitting on, because that's absolutely ridiculous, and put something softer there. But I agree, but I just think, if we're gonna do, first of all, I agree, let's get the audio fixed so people can hear us out there. But let's start looking at the bigger plan on what we need to do here so we can accomplish everything that we're trying to discuss, because this thing is antiquated, to say the least. So, and I know Dave's over there smiling.
The reason that I'm smiling is because I'm the only one who was here when this was a post office and converted into City Hall, and there was a big argument. The original design by the architect was to have that entrance be the public entrance, this entrance be the common council entrance. There were 6 wards then. There was the mayor and 6 ward members, and they were going to sit along here on a dais, and then there was going to be a church-like structure with pews going all the way back in that direction. There would be separate entrances, and the alderman from the 6th ward.
Kind of like the town. The town was a little bit.
Yes,
like that.
it's similar,
Yeah.
except long instead of wide. and the sixth ward alderman said, I am not gonna be in a situation where I cannot face my fellow aldermen and look them in the eye and talk to them. I'm not gonna sit in a row, we're gonna have to lean around and talk to them, and he adamantly refused to vote in favor of that. And so they redesigned the space to the space that you now see today, which gave a lot more space to the council member and a lot less space to the audience. But that was the discussion. You're probably absolutely right that this is way too small now for a reasonable presentation. But just where you stand depends on where you sit. Because that was 50 years ago now. So.
I mean, because maybe the big plan, Greg, would be maybe we should move down to the floor down below us
I was just
if we're going to try to for access and stuff like that. I don't know how you
It's
can
a lot of money in
accommodate
the
that.
general fund to do that.
Yeah, right, perfect.
Oh, I thought we're still made.
Waving a magic wand.
It's good. So I'd like us to think about short-term and long-term, the physical space changes seem like longer-term. I think within the next month, I hope we can figure out the audio issues, at least a temporary fix. So.
Do we have anything in the works? I know we've been looking at it for a while about upgrading, how much like a price variable, I guess, is what I'm looking for, like to do what we have to accomplish. I don't know which one of you needs to answer that.
I mean, a full-blown quote for the audio itself, no. You may have noticed we have a little bit of a budget issue. So we've been trying to do this a bit conservatively, so.
I don't know how to respond to that.
Don?
If the public wanted to speak from here, I'll donate a mic cord where we can just unplug this one, plug it in, and it'd be an extension, put this microphone up there, and then be able to hear the public.
That would work.
Carrie, I'll give you the cord.
Yeah, that
Thank you.
would work.
That was the short-term solution in the emails that we had going back and forth to at least be able to try and move your microphone over to allow for during the public comment section.
Right.
Thank you.
I have an extension cord if you want.
Thank you.
Great. I can't keep my mouth shut on this. Can we get a quote on how to upgrade all of this? I understand I think transparency outweighs some of the stuff that, we really need to be able to get our, I understand we sit up here and we yell about money day in and day out, but I just think we're trying to get messages out to the public, and if yes, it is hard. I've tried to do that too, and if it's hard, and now they're getting frustrated because I've taken several calls of, what you guys censoring stuff because you don't want us to hear it, and that's really not the case. And I keep saying, no, we really have problems that we've been working on. So I just think I understand sometimes band-aiding things together isn't the right solution either. And thank you for trying to do that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I support that completely. I think we should. I think we've tried a couple times now. There's been swings and misses.
Right. So what would be involved in pulling together something that would be more comprehensive and get a cost?
We'll have to reach out to some contractors that do this kind of thing and see if we can get some people in here to advise.
Mhm.
Take a month, like you said.
Yeah. Elaine?
Yeah, I just wanted to add as far as the sound accessibility, right? Like when you're saying, it's fine for everybody up here, because I watched quite a few of the meetings that I've missed, on YouTube. And so it's fine for everybody up here. And it's not just the public. It's oftentimes when we have presentations, like staff or like, somebody like Susan was here to talk to us about the DEER program. Those are the kinds of things that don't get captured. You can maybe hear a little garble, but it is difficult to capture. And since we're talking about long-term as well, just to keep in mind, with the accessibility and the physical space, there's a lot more that we could do to make this area much more accessible. We may have room once we sit down, but in case the public doesn't notice, we have to do quite a bit of shuffling to get to our seats sometimes. So.
Great. So we'll look at something maybe a month or so down the road where we'll have had the input of some professionals, and we might be able to even determine what that would look like and what it might cost. Great. This is a good path we're on. I'm going to take back my magic wand. Anything else for council yes?
I just wanted to follow up quickly on the finance meeting. So in the same vein of wanting to participate and be informed, the agenda for that came out at I received it in my inbox at 4:18 for the 5 o'clock meeting, same day. It was like 175 pages long or something like that. So I mean, that's not the first time that has happened. I've been up here and I will use the word complain because I do complain about it. There's no way that anyone, regardless of their outside obligations, would be able to absorb all that information in 42 minutes and come to a meeting prepared. And if you have no outside obligations. So I think, one of the things that I find particularly challenging about that is that like 75 or so pages of that was a proposal and a contract for like almost $500,000 expenditure, which we haven't voted on. It hasn't been moved forward, but it does deserve real thought and understanding and consideration, and I just don't find that appropriate, like, at all. And so I probably could go on about, trying to understand why it happened that way, but I think that really what's important, the point is, I think that we need to set expectations, boundaries around when an agenda is set and sent. Who is setting the agenda, I think also should be up for discussion. But when an agenda is set and sent, what that procedure looks like, when it is appropriate to deviate from that procedure, or like, for example, I'll throw it out there, I think that, we have all previously agreed, and I think there have been several fluctuations of this since the finance meeting now is on Thursday. The council agenda was supposed to be to us on Wednesday for those who are following along. In order to do, some dance about what's going to be on the consent agenda and what's not. That's not possible anymore. Finance is now on Thursday. So we get it on Friday. There have been times when, and I don't think this is fair to city staff who, work all day and then come to these meetings as we do, that, we've gotten it very late at night, well after business hours. I just don't understand, like, what holds up the agenda and why those things couldn't be provided on a supplemental agenda so that the information could get to the relevant council members and the public in a timely manner to be able to understand the topics that are up for discussion and any background information. So I would like to see, I think we've agreed previously on agendas being sent out, well, for council meetings, it's the Friday before the Tuesday. And then anything that doesn't make that deadline, I think should be on a supplemental agenda, and maybe that item is, up for consideration separately. But it's just, in my opinion, it's like not, like, our government cannot function in a way where we are like racing to a meeting deadline and expected to skim 75 pages of something and then have a productive conversation on it. So I wanted to bring that up. I'm not on the committee, but I was like, there were a couple things that I did have some comments or questions on. I couldn't come to the committee meeting. I thought about just like, okay, well, in the 5 minutes I've had to read this, here are my questions. And I was like, no, you know what, I'll just bring it up. But also I tried to watch it on YouTube and it wasn't on YouTube. So I think in terms of like transparency, like having our agendas posted, knowing what the topics are going to be so that you can make a point to be there if you have questions, or watch, making sure that the video is available so that you can be informed. I just think that, that was a really, I don't know, kind of blatant example of that system not working. So I wanted to bring that up for discussion. I hope that other council members have an opinion on it and we can get somewhere here where we set an expectation going forward for what agenda distribution looks like as a process.
So We know what our agenda is typically early on Friday, and it's the supporting documentation that is so necessary, obviously, to your being able to have a productive council meeting that takes the length of time. And then any number of different things that we don't have a large staff. Sometimes things come up in the middle of a Friday that wind up moving the production of those support documents to the, deeper into the day. We could send the agenda with some support documentation as we have it, so that you know what is on the agenda, and then have that rest of the support documentation generated in basically in the fashion it is right now, which is as quickly as Greg is able to. Go ahead.
Can I make an alternative suggestion?
Of course you can.
Nothing makes it onto the agenda until the supporting documentation is prepared. You go one at a time. This topic is ready to discuss. Boop, drop it into the file.
I've attempted to implement exactly that. We've set a deadline of 9 a.m. Tuesday to have the Finance and Human Resources forms completed with all supporting documentation prepared. It's proven it hasn't worked. We can try again to hold ourselves to that, and there may be things that just don't go forward, and that may have impacts, negative impacts potentially to city operations, and we will live with that in that case, in order to have a more stable and set timeline with things. I think unfortunately the bottom line is there's I hate to say there's too much to do and not enough people to do it. To put everything together with the level of detail that we try to provide, we didn't always provide as much detail in
Oh, I know
forms
that.
and all of that.
I appreciate
And that was a problem, and so providing the 75, it ends up being 150 pages, and I know it's impossible to read through that. Ultimately, rather than canceling a finance meeting 15-20 minutes before it's supposed to happen, having it and having the opportunity to walk the members through, here's what's coming up, and we can put it all in discussion if you want at council, seems to me that keeps government moving, rather than just coming to a halt and then let's wait 2 weeks and come back and try again. But we can take that approach. It would be easier for me, stress-wise, to show up at 9 a.m. and say, if we don't have it, we're not bringing it forward. We'll push it to next week. It's not an emergency. And just see how we adjust over time to that.
So to be clear, that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying if you have agenda item A, don't put it on the agenda until you have the supporting documentation ready to go. Not hold the whole agenda until a specific deadline. I think if you don't have agenda item A prepared, then maybe it becomes agenda item Q, but that there's going to be, the first one ready to go is the first one on the agenda. I mean, in my opinion, because what good is supporting documentation that you're waiting to give if nobody has time to read it? I mean, for me, I think I did wonder, which one of these agenda items held up the agenda this far, Could it have been any of them? Was any of those things super urgent? I mean, if we didn't move on Tyler Technology, I presumed that it was probably that 75-page contract proposal that held up the agenda. Did that have to go? Could that have been sent later as an FYI, we'll talk about this next time, since it didn't come up? I mean, there wasn't, in my opinion, anything that was of critical urgency there. Maybe the OPT contract, but
It's more than just the agenda itself or one thing or a supporting document holding it up. It's everything else that the job entails, not just my job, but everyone who contributes to the agenda and that sort of thing. So there's, I think it comes down to setting a hard deadline, and that's it. We don't move it forward unless it's ready by then. We have to adjust to that. I think that's what we have to do.
can I just, so my suggestion is, if you have the deadline, then send what you have at that time. And then if you have to send something, put it on a supplemental agenda, recognizing that it might not move forward. That's what I'm trying to say. I think that there's no, because if 4:18 on the day of the meeting at 5 is okay, is 4:59 on the day of the meeting okay? I mean, is it okay with us as a government to put out the agenda 1 minute before the meeting, 42 minutes before the meeting? Like, where is that, you know? So I think just deciding when that is, sending what you have, and then anything that's not ready, you know, you still have that 48 hours or whatever that you could keep working on it and send it out. But I think that getting something in the hands of people so that you can prepare is like, it's so important. And I think for the community as well, it shouldn't be a secret what the Finance and HR Committee is going to talk about today, you know?
I'm gonna object here. I think you're going too far.
Okay,
As
I
chair,
disagree.
I think there was absolutely no problem in terms of transparency. Don and I handled the meeting. We went through, if actually you look at the agenda.
I did look at the agenda
The
at
agenda was
4:18, the
extremely
minute it came to
straightforward,
my
and I
email.
just wanna say for the record, this was one time. As
It's
chair
not
of
one
this-
time. I've been
as
on this
a-
board
Yeah.
for 6 years.
As chair of this committee, this has never happened before.
To you.
Of course to me, Katie, I am the chair.
Address your comments to the chair, please. We invite into a dialogue. It's not the way to do it.
Thank you, David.
Well, obviously, I don't feel that I've gone too far by making a request that documents are presented to council and the public in a timely manner. And it has been something that's been consistent during my term and a half on city council, and I know prior to that as well. It's not the first time I brought it up. I'm just saying it really, in my opinion, I don't think that it's acceptable, and I understand that I'm not the one, like, Greg has had to hound me about community wellness agendas. It's my job as the chair to put that together. I know that you can't do that as the chair of the Finance and HR Committee necessarily, so it's kind of a special case. But I do think that we need to hold ourselves to that standard and kind of maybe rethink the way that agendas go out, because I think it is really important that, you know, people know what we're gonna talk about. That's why we're here.
Have we ever done finance committee on Wednesdays instead of Thursdays?
It used to be on Monday. Yeah, it's,
I'm sorry, Mike.
I just wonder, I mean, technology is evolving, and the way we get the information is in a giant packet. But is that the best way to do it? Is there, so say you say it's, I mean, if you played out the scenario where you have stuff that's ready and stuff that isn't ready by the deadline. Stuff that's ready could certainly get attached, but could there be links in the agenda to a place, you know, on the city website where these documents were added whenever they were
yes.
ready, and therefore, you know, and if the document doesn't end up getting ready, you table it, as opposed to, I don't know, I don't wanna create any more burden for city staff because you guys are already stretched thin.
I think the meeting manager that we're looking at, which is part of the Tyler technology, will really make that easy. To implement that now with our current city website, I wouldn't want to commit to that without having a longer discussion with Carrie to figure out what exactly that entails, if that is a lot of extra work or what. But I take that, and I think we can talk about it. I don't care what you want. If you have anything to share off the top of your head.
We have a link. The city's website has a calendar on it if you scroll down. And it has, each event has a link that takes you to that particular board or commission's agendas. And at the top of that list, once you click on it, is the most recent published agenda. And in theory, we could update the packet as materials become available, but then instead of the burden resting on us to distribute it, that burden may then rest on the official or the member of the public to be sure to check back for the most recent version.
Exactly.
So extra work-wise, I mean, with hopefully the transition from Adobe to Bluebeam, that will hopefully take care of that. We've talked about that a little bit. Adobe's become a little bit cumbersome, but the update, the upload itself is not huge. I would just be concerned about time management when it comes to how many times are we updating it and.
So what I would like to do, listening to these are reasonable concerns, and I, as well as anybody, know the stress that you deal with on the day that you're trying to put out an agenda with its supporting documentation. So those things notwithstanding, I think that we can have some conversation within the context of this city staff to determine some way forward that may be exactly what we're doing, somewhat modified, or something totally different. But I think because we know, because you know, as more so than anyone, the hurdles, the obstacles that are part of the process, that we take a little bit of time and understanding that there's a legitimate concern about the timelines, what can we reasonably do, and then bring that back for some council discussion. Yes?
Well, I would just like to say that as chair, the meeting went off without any issue.
Yeah.
We
You're right.
conducted the meeting.
Sure, but
I mean, we had a thorough discussion.
Sure.
And it was no shorter nor longer than any other meeting.
Right.
There was no concerns from either the other committee member nor from the chair.
Right.
So I would just like to put that forward, that
I-
the committee itself
I
did not have
appreciate it.
any concerns.
Yeah, I appreciate that, I do.
Okay.
But taking the specific circumstance out of the equation and talking more generally about some of the concerns that council has had around the timeliness of the documentation arriving in their inbox. We can have some conversation among city staff. Most specifically, we can have some conversation to provide maybe some options. So we'll do that. Does that sound reasonable? Yes,
Sure.
Katie?
Can I ask two
Yes,
questions?
of course.
One is agenda and supporting document managed on a shared drive somewhere?
Yes.
Could council be given access to that shared drive so that we can view agendas?
If you want to come into City Hall, yes.
If what?
If you want to come into City Hall, yes.
Is it OneDrive or is it like?
No, it's a local Windows file.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could it be like a cloud drive that we could log into with our secure city email?
That's the goal moving forward with Tyler, but the system capabilities presently.
Okay.
So they.
We'd be uploading the we'd be uploading the materials as they were present.
Okay. Second question. Mayor, what is your involvement in agenda preparation, if any?
The agenda that you see is the agenda that Greg and I arrive at in our Friday meetings, and
Okay.
I mean, I set the agenda.
Okay. I just was wondering because it does seem, and I understand that you are the one with the working knowledge generally, but it does seem like it feels like sort of your task, which I don't know that it necessarily is, like in the charter. So I don't know if there's a way, I mean, I appreciate that you are open to additional processes because this isn't like a blame thing, but it is me saying like, we can't continue to do this. I have been a broken record about it for 6 years, And so I'm trying to figure out, and I had mentioned a shared drive previously, I think that updating the process, doing something differently, like timely agendas should not be a controversial thing, and I know that that's the goal, and it's not about like, oh, you're failing to do this, but like, okay, if this process isn't working to get to the goal, like how do we get there? So, yeah, I mean, maybe that means shifting some of the work so that it's not only you, because you are the most critical person in the entire organization. And I would love for you to not be spending your time formatting PDFs for our benefit.
So we'll come back to it. We'll have some conversation internally. We'll bring back to council some recommendations for discussion at the very least. Okay?
Okay.
All right. I want to go back to motion number 13 at this point, unless there's something else for council consideration. Is there, having read this motion, is there a desire among any council members to move this to executive session?
I'm good with it the way it is.
So is there no? Okay, then then we'll move on to motion number 13. That the Common Council authorizes the city administrator to execute a memorandum of agreement with the CSEA Local 1000 AFSCME, ASME, AFL-CIO, City of Oneonta Unit 8101 to modify the terms of the collective bargaining agreement, Article 7, Section 4, Article 14, And Article 16 to remove the education adjustments for employees with certain degrees, update employee sick leave benefits, and add parental leave benefits. Do I have a motion to approve? Don, followed by Katie, and discussion.
I just want to say nice job on the Roman numerals.
I'm sorry?
Nice job on the Roman numerals.
I haven't seen those in a bit. Thank you. Discussion? Well, okay. In that case, we'll take a vote.
Councilmember Mosher Campoli?
Aye.
Councilmember Welsh Russo?
Aye.
Councilmember McHugh?
Aye.
Councilmember LaParshu?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington? Councilmember Forrester Rothbart?
Yes.
Councilmember Matheson?
Yes.
All right. Is there any other rationale for an executive session among council members? All right. That's being the case, I will say we're adjourned.